This is a fascinating book. I'd like to read a section from the opening. You say, she came, she saw, she crashed. In the 3 centuries of the history of the British Prime Minister, there has never been a premiership like that of Liz Truss. She had promise, the most experienced incomer in 32 years, with high intelligence, a clear plan, and the right focus diagnosed: growth. Britain has had short-serving prime ministers before, but nowhere else in our long history, you write, has a prime minister arrived in power, so spectacularly mishandled an ambitious agenda, detonated an economic crisis, reversed their policies and fallen from power in less than 50 days. It paved the way for the worst Tory election result in history in July 2024. We shall not see her like again. Why are you sure that we won't see her like again?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I'm not. I mean, we could, but I think it's very unlikely. It hasn't happened for 300 years. I mean, that will take us 300 years into the future. I mean, it was spectacular. It was like a firework display. It was unimaginable. It was unbelievable. But it happened, and many people listening and watching the programme tonight, their businesses, their own personal finances, mortgages will have suffered and still be suffering because of what she did. And she didn't listen. I mean, look, she had the right policy. It's like a new manager of English football coming on and saying, look, their ambition is to win the Euro 28 and the next World Cup. I mean, that's the right ambition. She had the right ambition. It's just she hadn't a clue how to bring it about.
You met her, I think it was 9 months after she left the premiership, and you unexpectedly had an encounter with her. Tell us about that.
Yes, my first time I met her. So there I was at a party thinking, my goodness, everyone here is so interesting and no one's going to want to talk to me. And suddenly, out of the blue, there was this face in front of mine and it turned out to be Liz Truss. And she said, I hear you're writing a book about me. I didn't know what to say. I said, well, I mean, I said, I may be. And she said, I am writing my own book, don't you know? And I said, well, good on you. And before I could think through what I was going to say about it, she suddenly gone into the crowd. And there I was, again, left talking to nobody.
Now, let's go to Tuesday, September the 6th, 2022. She's become Conservative Party leader. And you say that the response to her was, you quote a Conservative MP, recollecting the atmosphere among fellow MPs the first time that Liz Truss addressed them as Prime Minister. The response to her was tepid. We all noticed it didn't feel right. First of all, that leadership contest had been complicated. Secondly, she becomes leader, becomes Prime Minister, and from the outset, there were people within the Conservative Party parliamentary grouping that were saying there's something wrong here.
Yeah, so we need to be a bit careful here because her ultra supporters will say, she fell because Rishi Sunak supporters and other elements never accepted her and they were determined to do her down. I mean, there's a kind of element of truth in that, but she didn't win the popular vote. So just like we're now seeing, you got the candidates for the Tory party leadership, and Priti Patel has been knocked out, and it gets down to they're just 2. And she made it just through to the final 2. Penny Mordaunt had been in the lead with Rishi Sunak all the way through, but she just pipped in to the final 2. But she came second against him. And, she never, a more intelligent or astute operator would have recognised that she wasn't the popular choice amongst her own clan of Tory MPs and thought, I'm going to go out and I'm going to build bridges, I'm going to win people round, I'm going to have them into Downing Street, have them to Chequers, have them into my room in the Houses of Parliament, I'm going to listen to them, make them feel valued, but not a bit of it. She sailed in as if she'd come in with a stonking Starmer-like majority. She never won her own general election, remember that. It was Boris Johnson's election victory from December 2019, and Boris Johnson had been key in bringing her to power. But, she didn't accept the fact that she was never the popular choice of Tory MPs. She was there really and she won because she wasn't Rishi Sunak.
But how do you explain her lack of desire to go and press the flesh and buy everybody a drink and have a cup of tea with them? I mean, was she capable of reading the room, or was it a matter of just she's not comfortable enough in those settings?
I think both of that. She didn't read the room. She didn't have those political antennae that we were hearing from Tony Blair earlier. I mean, Tony Blair, had political antennae whizzing 100 feet a mile above his head. She had none of that. She just didn't get it. She didn't understand. She also wasn't good at pressing the flesh, Some prime ministers, Keir Starmer's not particularly good at it either. I don't think that necessarily matters, but you need to compensate in other ways. You need to win people over. The power of the prime minister, like the power of the American president, is the power to persuade. And she never persuaded enough people of her cause to go for that mini budget. If she'd done that, she'd listened to them, it could have been very different. She could still be in power.
She could still be in power if she'd read the room and played the room better.
There needn't to be a general election till January 2025. She could still be the prime minister.
Now, you said at the beginning she had the right policy. I mean, by which you meant the right ambition, which was to spur growth.
Yeah. And to try and spread it and to spread enterprise throughout the country. I mean, one thing that is so distressing is the inequality, the regional inequality in Britain, economically and socially, and in terms of healthcare outcomes. And she wanted to address all of that, and that was surely the right thing to do. But she's made that cause harder because she went about it in such a candid, bad way.
I want to ask you more about that in a second, but we've got a question here that's been sent in on text by Nikki in Kent, who says, Sir Anthony, does the Tory party get the disastrous leaders it deserves, like Truss, because the choice in the end is made by a few Tory members who are of the same demographic, social class, ethnicity and mindset?
So, ethnicity is obviously interesting because the Conservative Party is so diverse at its top. But I think you're right, Nikki, that as it's turned out to be, a disastrous change came in, which was introduced 15 years ago, which has allowed the party members to have the final say of the final two, as is going to happen this time round. And the party members are so unrepresentative, overwhelmingly over 60, and from a very limited social and every other kind of background. And that's not the representative of Conservative voters, or indeed the kinds of voters the Conservative Party is going to need to win over if it's ever going to defeat Keir Starmer.
And so in terms of the current leadership campaign, and we're going to talk about it more in detail later, but what does that composition of the party membership suggest to you about where this leadership battle is heading?
Well, the party leadership, or the party in the country, this very unrepresentative group of Tory members who have the ultimate say, will almost always go for the more right-wing candidate. And that's not necessarily what the Tory voters... Look, it's so obvious if you look at history. The Tory party dominated the 20th century. It was called the Conservative Century, was the title of an earlier book I wrote in the 1990s. It's dominated the last 2 centuries because it hasn't been a right-wing party. It's been in the centre ground. The other parties, usually Labour, have been off to the left. And most voters, surprise, surprise, are in the centre ground. And they believe in the nation, they believe in a good foreign policy, good defence policy, but they also believe in the welfare state, and they believe in law and order. And that's the Tories, that is where it's won from. That's how it's dominated so much of British history. And, it's hardly rocket science, is it?
So of the 5 currently in the contest, who does that most favour?
Well, maybe maybe James Cleverly, maybe Tom Tugendhat. Somebody who is able to persuade many people who voted Labour that the Tory party best represents their interests. The Tory party as the one nation party, as the great 19th century Tory Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli talked about. It's the one nation party. And so I think those two perhaps.
OK.